And welcome to Zoom with Czarny. I'm Dustin Czarny, Democratic Elections Commissioner for Onondaga County. And this is my interview show where I interview candidates and Democratic activists from across the country and here in New York and Onondaga County. I'm very happy to have members of the Outrun Coalition come on our show today. They're a member of people that are focusing on running diverse Democrats in rural parts of not just New York, but all over the country. They have an incredible record. They've won 73% of their races, where they've put up candidates that they've put in red portions, or what is thought to be red portions of counties, rural portions of counties, and they've been able to win those races. So I think it's something to listen to and learn. That it's a tremendous organization, and I hope you stay tuned for the interview. Here at the Board of Elections, we still got petitioning objections ongoing. It looks like we have about 9 right now. At the end of today, there still could be some that come in the mail over the next couple of days. We also have a court hearing tomorrow. I detailed all of that on my previous Commissioner in a Car. So check that on the feeds. That goes into all of that. Hopefully by next week, I'll have the outcomes of all of those, or most of those objection hearings that are scheduled this week and next. We're still waiting on news from the New York State budget. It does look like, as of the taping of this program, not only do we have a new chief judge on the Court of Appeals, but also another associate judge that is made the Court of Appeals in New York slightly more liberal. So this is a little shift in New York politics. Could affect redistricting for congressional races and assembly races that are looking for next year, and also redistricting cases for county races that are going around. There's several different redistricting lawsuits for local counties as well that may make their way up to the Court of Appeals. So we have a lot of work ahead of us and a lot of interesting times as well. And that's all I got for news that's going around the Board of Elections. So enjoy my interview with Paolo Cremedis and Giancarlo and Mr. Llaverias, who is the members of the Outrun Coalition. And please stay tuned for that interview. Bye-bye. And we're back with my new friends, Paolo Cremedis and Giancarlo Llaverias. They are members of the Outrun Coalition, a group of Democrats that have kind of like rebel Democrats. They're out there recruiting and helping people run in rural areas, and people of a diverse background running in rural areas, something that I think is a noble mission. So I wanted to have them on. Paolo, Giancarlo, thank you for coming on Zoom with Czarny.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. So,
Paolo, let's start with you.
Sure.
Why don't you give us a little bit about your background before we get into the organization, and tell us, how you got to this point of starting and being a part of this organization.
Sure. So I'm originally from Peru. I'm a first-generation Peruvian American immigrant. My family came here because of economic reasons, and also kind of like there was this crazy war going on. And I don't know, my family in Latin America had always been involved in some form of like civil society, pro-democracy thing. And I think there's something really cool I learned. I can trace it back to my grandfather in the Andes, going into these little towns, recruiting people to run for town council and stuff. And I didn't know that, but that's something new. And so I came here when I was 7, and I don't know, something happened at 16 years old where I just got turned on. And my political key got turned, and I started working on campaigns. I got involved with the Steelworkers Union, and my first congressional campaign was in 2006, helping Democrat Eric Massa. He won in 2008. Not a great story that much afterwards, and I got involved with the Democratic Party. Lo and behold, there was an opportunity from the state Democratic Party for a position that had been not filled for years, 6 years from before, called the Rural Caucus Chair, a chair of organizing young people across the 47 upstate counties that are rural. And I decided to take that on. And, I met Giancarlo through that. I met a bunch of people through that. And we decided to kind of mobilize people and actually stand up for upstate New York and say, we can mobilize ourselves. And these communities are worth more than just saying write them off. standing up against, standing up with liberals and sometimes against kind of like a liberal elite that exists in places like New York City that don't think that people like me and Giancarlo exist. And I was the first in upstate New York. I was the first rural caucus chair of color. And yeah, we were doing great work from 2016 to 2020. A lot of young people got awoken. We mobilized a lot of young people in upstate New York. We elected 84 people to local office across upstate New York. And we also helped kind of break the Republican supermajority, because a lot of people think that the supermajority was, broken in Long Island. No, it was broken in upstate New York in the Hudson Valley and in the Syracuse region, right? Raised a lot of money for candidates running for state senate. And then, we were just moving. We were mobilizing for 2020, and the murder of George Floyd happened, and we just noticed that we hit a wall, and not a wall with Republicans or something, but we noticed that there were issues in talking about problems that affect people of color and affect diverse communities that exist in rural communities in upstate New York within the Democratic Party. I'm not going to name names or anything, but I some of the things that I was hearing, and some of the things that some of my friends were hearing, and we'll hear a little bit more about this, is candidates of color being told that they can't talk about racial justice, that we can't talk about Black Lives Matter, that condemning the murder of George Floyd was too partisan. One particular candidate ended up calling for the what's it called? They wanted to strive for a world without Black Lives Matter, and I noticed that at that point I kind of burned out and I hit an emotional wall, because I wasn't really ready to be forced by a state political party entity to endorse these people, and so I quit. And I quit the state party, and I gave myself some time, and nobody really took over the work that we were doing across upstate New York, and so we had a bunch of folks who were like, well, we can't find candidates to run for local office. And meanwhile, Dustin, while we were mobilizing young people and getting people elected to office, we noticed that the ones that survived re-election in red areas were the ones who were, number one, diverse, and number two, came from the communities where they were running in, right? So that was a big factor in starting Outrun. And we started talking about 2 years ago about, our first training was Shenango County Democratic Party. They had their first contested sheriff's race in 30 years because of that. We worked with Delaware County Democratic Party. We recruited over 300 candidates for local office across 14 states now. We work with rural organizing coalitions across the country. And we advocate for making sure that when we look at a picture of rural America within the Democratic Party, that we're talking about diversity, that we're talking about equity, and that we're talking about inclusion, so that we actually have an accurate picture of our rural communities. But that's how we started Outrun. Anyway.
And Giancarlo, you're a part of this as well. What was your journey to getting there? I know a lot of it's probably the same, but I want to hear how did you get involved with the Democratic Party? And you're actually running for office right now as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. So currently I'm the incumbent for District 1 in the Dutchess County Legislature. I got voted in November 2016 and took office January of 2017. I really got involved in politics because I lost a lot of friends to drugs and violence. The area in which I live in, the town and the city in which I reside, is 5 miles long. We're in Poughkeepsie, New York. And we are an area that's really forgotten. People come here for our wine trails, the historic sites that we have around here, especially with FDR, our walkway of the bridge that we have that's really famous here. But a lot of electeds were forgetting about the residents that live here. And the residents that live here were going through a housing crisis. They were going through issues with law enforcement. We were going through issues with our youth. Currently in Poughkeepsie, in Dutchess, there is no youth center in Poughkeepsie. So people have a YMCA or a Boys and Girls Club. We don't have that. There is also no access to trade schools. So there's 3 colleges around my area: Vassar, Marist, and Dutchess Community College, all great institutions. But that doesn't mean that everybody has access to those institutions. And given that, there was a lot of violence happening because of drugs in my area. So I lost from 2011 to present day 23, losing over 70 of my friends to drugs and violence. In the block that I grew up in, there were 10 families. Now there's only 2. The rest of them are dead. Half of my graduating class of high school in 2009, which was over 300, we're now down to about 140. And seeing all of this violence take place, all of this death take place, really pissed me off, to be quite frank with you. And I never voted prior to running. I was never involved in politics. I was just angry. I was really angry that there were no answers to what was going on. And anytime that I saw a white person with a suit and a tie is because they came during their campaign season. They came to get votes from Latinos. They came to, the Baptist churches to get the black vote. And that was the only time we saw them. And so I said to myself, well, what the hell? I think I'm pretty enough to run. I think I have the code switching skills, which was a survival technique that I learned really young, to be able to speak to the messages of the hood to these white folks who may not understand it from somebody who came from my area. And that's exactly what prompted me to run. Knowing that we didn't have a youth center, knowing that there were bad relations in law enforcement, and knowing that there was not any representation of those real residents of the area in the legislature. And that prompted me to run as a first-time candidate with a lot of help from a lot of good friends in the Democratic Party in Dutchess County. A lot of that came from Paolo and some of the people that are on our Outrun board now, and became the first person of color in the District 1 seat since the inception of the Dutchess County legislature. And since then, I've been making white Republicans uncomfortable, and it's been fun times ever since.
Yeah. So here we are now. We're you've started the Outrun Coalition. So tell me a little bit about this organization. I think we got a background of what maybe the goals might be, but this isn't a small organization that just is, starting in New York State. You're nationwide. So tell us about the Outrun and how it's grown so fast. Paolo, we'll start with you.
So, we had connections with other people. Like, ironically, I wasn't like the time that I was involved in the state Democratic Party. There were also a lot of other states that had like first time people of color, rural organizers involved in their state Democratic parties in places like Nebraska, my good friend Caleb Rohrer, North Carolina, a bunch of different places across the country. And we would tell them about the things that we were going through in New York State. And all of the things that were happening, and they noticed and they told us, my man, that's just not a problem there. It's a problem here. And we noticed it was a nationwide problem. And we noticed that we could put a face to the person that the Democratic Party wants to recruit and the person that might want to run but is kind of afraid to run, and they could see themselves in office. And so typically when we do a training is we usually get Giancarlo and like 5 or 6 other Democratic elected officials, all of them who are LGBTQ plus women, people of color, BIPOC, indigenous, all that stuff, immigrants, disabled, and they talk about their experience about running for office. And they talk about the barriers that they faced running for office. And they talk about the issues that they were having with the Democratic Party running for office. And sure, do we target people who we think would be good candidates? Yes. But we also target, and I'm going to say it, like a mostly older white rural county Democratic Party leadership that can sometimes think that, they're doing good things by stopping somebody from running for office because they might, quote unquote, not have enough experience, but end up kind of like gatekeeping against having a candidate to run for office. And so why we've been able to expand so much is because every single time we've done a training, and we've done these in Texas and a bunch of other states, we do get those questions. We do get the offensive questions. We do get the comments about like, how can we talk about rural organizing? We answer them, and we shut people down sometimes. But what we also show is our allies in those states and the good meaning people that are involved in those county Democratic parties, how to organize against that and how to outmaneuver that so that you can elevate young people and people of color and LGBTQ plus folks to run for local office. One thing we've also noticed is that because of like, being an immigrant, being a young person, being an LGBTQ plus person, being a person of color, even if you are in a majority white district, you've had to overcome a lot of adversity to get accepted in these communities, right? Like when I grew up in Elmira, people didn't know how to pronounce my name. People called me Paul. And some people might be like, well, that's racist or whatever. It's like, no, these people gave me a name before they even knew how to pronounce my name. That means that they accept me and they love me, right? And that's the kind of like thing that we were able to kind of mobilize around a lot of people. And I'm not going to lie to you, like, have we had issues with other organizations? Have other organizations told us that our trainings are unnecessary or that we're rocking the boat or that, we are making things difficult for Democrats. Yes. But we also have a 73% win rate. In some towns as dark, and I'll tell you, in East Texas and Red River County, some towns as dark as dark red as like 90% for Trump. So we have that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
We're going to get back to that win rate because that is impressive.
Yeah.
Giancarlo, as Outrun has grown, what have you seen is some of the needs that the communities that are coming to you for training and recruitment? What are some of the most common needs for communities that are just starting along this road? What do you notice?
I find that the first thing that people need is encouragement. They need to feel motivated to do it. A lot of people have had dreams to run, have gotten the bug to run, but never felt encouraged, whether it be by their families or by their local party. They weren't encouraged. And what Outrun does, before we get to our trainings, we talk about our stories. And those stories give these people the push that they need to say, you know what, now I want to run. We had that in one of our last trainings where we had a young Latino man who wanted to run for a town supervisor position. And after our trainings, him and I had a conversation for about 20 minutes for like 2 weeks, and me encouraging him to run, because if you have the passion to do it, the worst that can happen is that you lose. But then if you lose, then people cannot turn a blind eye to the issues that you have raised. And if you win, now you can be the voice box of the people who have not been heard. And we have had this conversation for 2 weeks, and then eventually he tells me, hey, I'm going to run now. And now this individual is running for town supervisor as a first-time candidate, as a Latino, in an area that he can win. He can actually win this area. And so first, it's just motivation. People need to see other people who look like them, who speak like them, who talk like them, to say, damn, you're elected? Paolo, you've been behind the scenes making this work? How can I do the same? And for some of us, like myself, I don't have a prior background in politics outside of being elected. I'm a chef. I'm a cook. That is my job outside of policy. So I may not know who you'd vote for, but I definitely know how you like your steak done. And so that's how I start the conversation. Oh, hey, I remember you, man. You came into my restaurant and you ordered the medium rare with the mashed potatoes. You don't like asparagus, so we switched it out for green beans. Oh, now the conversation is no longer about politics. It's about relationship. And so we see that people need motivation. They need to learn how to create relationships outside of politics, because in local politics, it's more about relation than it is connecting things to the federal level. And then we kind of talk about the nitty gritty stuff of, hey, what's a win number? How many doors you need to knock? What software do you need to be involved in so you're not doing things on paper and losing things, right? But the first thing is to connect with the people that you're training.
So that's a great segue to where I wanted to go next, Paolo, because training is something that your organization is doing a lot of. I know you just did a Finger Lakes training last month. You told me later on in May you're going to be doing a training out in Montana. What is this training involved, and how do people get involved with your training?
So you can find us on Twitter at the Outrun Co. By the way, this is going to shock you. Our organization, we don't have funding. We do this out of the love of our hearts. We all have day jobs. We're able to do this because we love rural America. Like, we love being from where we're from. And basically our trainings work like this. You give us 2 weeks. We get a panel of local elected officials from across the country, from rural parts of the country together. And we get them together to start talking about their story. After we have like a 50-minute session where folks talk about running for office as a person of color, an LGBTQ plus person, a woman, what have you. We then end up kind of going through a template discussion where we build a template specifically tailored for each region that has like information about like the demographics, what you need to do to win. And it leaves with like a message about like, don't tell people that they'd have to have experience to run for office, because experience is something you learn through handshakes, not something that you just learn before you run. And so we really do two things that we tack on is we want to open people's minds, because oftentimes when we ask, and I don't have the information on me, but something like when you ask like a rural Democrat, like who can win their communities, they think it is always going to be some like old white guy. And oftentimes that's not true. And we end up having like a Q&A session, and sometimes those do get kind of emotional because people do end up talking about the things that they faced in their county Democratic parties. In West Virginia, we had people tell us about, their local indigenous Democratic Party caucus being dissolved by a group of organizers. I personally we were called some very nasty language in Texas, dealing with people who were, didn't understand that they were saying things that were problematic, but asking us how the Blacks, Latinos, and gays can join the Democratic Party and get involved. And, in places like Iowa, where, we bring this diversity training together, we work so hard, and we still have people at the end asking us, why aren't we talking about agriculture? And so the thing that we do is we do have those difficult conversations. And mind you, I think the other thing that Giancarlo mentioned that we do is we build encouragement. We also build encouragement for people to speak back and to clap back against this stuff locally, so that it doesn't happen again in the future, and that we don't stop people running for office. And I think that's the most valuable service that we provide.
Yeah, and those conversations, those hard conversations, is something that our party, and I will defend some of the party. I don't think anybody's trying to do it for racial wins, but these reasons. But they fall into the trap of believing that diverse candidates can only win in urban areas, and that the only diverse areas are urban areas. And as urban areas have, there's a lot of movement in our society. There's a lot of migration in our society. I see it in Onondaga County, where some of the areas where we've been able to put together some wins in outside of the city of Syracuse and in some of these rural communities is because they have started to become more diverse, and and you're not ignoring the population as it's coming in.
Yeah. So
Giancarlo, you ran for office. You've won. You're running again, and that so that is a brave thing to do, because I don't think people realize how hard it is to run for office. They think everybody's running for power, and as soon as you put your name on the ballot, steaks. Well, in your case, steaks might actually come your way, but that's from your restaurant. But like all kinds of luxury goods are going to be coming your way, and that you're on the public dole, and they don't realize like organizations like this exist, basically out of the, as Paolo said, the love of the work. So what's your message to people who are thinking about running? What do you do to get those people off the fence and get them to run?
To do it scared. To do it scared. For me, as much as I'm confident in how I speak and how I present myself, running for office is always nerve-wracking for me. But I've learned to do it scared, because for me, as a person of color, as a person who identifies as an Afro-Latino, and understanding that the dichotomy for me isn't about Democrat or Republican. For me, it's about either continuously being oppressed or finding that small window to create liberation for my community. And that's how I put it out as. Yes, I'm a Democrat. I believe in progressive ideals. I'm a staunch progressive. But I also know the reality of people of color, that we've been hurt by both parties. And that what we need to do is to band ourselves together and do it scared. And that's why it's so important for us as the Outrun Coalition. We're the myth busters of the Democratic Party, but we're also the big brothers and the big sisters to know that, what? We did it scared too. And we're still scared. But we can help you along the lines. We can give you the flashlight. We can give you the tools in order to get through that dark place that you've never been through before. And so since I've been in office, the tunnel has lightened up a little bit. And since I've been in office, now there's more people willing to have the uncomfortable conversation of what it looks like to be a person of color, to be a person with disability, to be a person within the LGBTQ community to run for office. Now there's even more people running for office because of Outrun, and the messages that we have put out there are now ringing in people's ears because people are starting to see the shift and that they're not going to be able to stop the shift. So it's either they get with the boat or they're going to end up being sunk.
Yeah. I think you're muted.
Yeah, 3 years into the pandemic and I'm still dealing with this stuff, but that's okay. Everybody knows it's live now. So Paolo, you talked earlier about your 75% win rate.
73.
73. Okay,
After village elections, yeah.
Maybe we'll get to 75 after this general election. But what? And a lot of these wins are coming in low turnout, local elections. Which, again, the myth is Democrats can't win in these elections because there's not enough turnout, and that there's not enough pull from the top of the ticket to bring them in. And you were talking to me around the village elections in March that you did have a couple of wins there.
Yeah.
So, what's your philosophy around that? Why have you decided to just ignore the conventional wisdom and try to get these wins?
It's really funny that you bring that up because, why are we called Outrun? Because rural progressive Democrats have always had to outrun the top of the ticket to win. Giancarlo's outrun Kathy Hochul. I think a couple of other board members. I know Eric Ball, who was supposed to be on this call, but I'm sorry, he can't make it. I think he outran Joe Biden by 30 points in his village of Walton or something like that. And this is an openly LGBTQ plus and unopposed, by the way, unopposed. The Republicans couldn't find someone to run against him. Got the most votes in his last village election. And we aren't talking about the ticket or whatever. We are the top of the ticket. We are ourselves. We are going to run as ourselves, and we are going to make sure that we actually have conversations with the voters. And sure, are we going to talk, spend some time talking to people who voted for Trump and might vote for us? Yes. But we're also going to talk to the 8 people that haven't been talked to. We're going to talk. This is the luxury about hyper local elections that a lot of people don't realize. We have the time to be able to talk to the voters that people aren't talking to. We have the time to be able to do voter registration in a much more meaningful way than a congressional campaign could, or any sort of state legislative campaign, because we're here. We're here year round. And we're not just here in a way that's I'm here to do this. We are your voices in city government. John Deere, who's, Manlius town supervisor, who's on our board as well. The last training talked about people who supported Trump voted for him because he said, I'm your voice in City Hall. I'm not here to take money from the public, though. I am here to make sure that we can mobilize people. And I think that that's a better winning message than thinking that we have to somehow rely on Joe Biden, which, God bless him, to get out voters. We know our communities. We don't have to sit here and play political games. For what? So that we can say that we're moderate or whatever versus progressive, and then we end up losing. I would rather win elections being myself and being genuine and being, an immigrant BIPOC person that which, by the way, scares shit out of the Republicans that we can do this across rural areas because, we're not exactly white. And so when we can do that, it changes the dynamic of how we have these conversations in rural communities. And honestly, in a way, one of us in a town council, one of us in a village board, one of us on a county commission, a chancery court, what have you, justice of the peace, makes the Republicans govern less radically because we know how to win elections. And honestly, in a way, we represent, because, Democratic parties will write places off. We won't. And that's what I think really works really well.
Yeah, it's not an apples to apples comparison, but we see what's happening down in Tennessee. And their diverse voices were trying to be thrown out, and they have so far been returned and will most likely continue to be returned. And by standing up for their ideals, we saw that the Republicans targeted the African American members, and they are now have louder voices than they've ever had before. And Giancarlo, I am sure you've had instances like that in your public life. And what do you say to the, and what's happened in Tennessee is a triumph. But a lot of people see that and they say, why would I want to get involved in politics and put a target on my back? And how have you been able to overcome, some, luckily the members of Tennessee are getting the national backing and the youth vote, and they have a lot of allies that a lot of people may not always have. What do you say to the people who look at that and are not inspired, but are actually afraid of politics?
I think that's one that we validate that emotion, because that's a normal reaction to have. If that was me, I'd be scared. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's to one, validate that emotion and say, that's perfectly normal. That's okay to feel that way. Secondly, is to say, yes, this is happening, but you have a support system. That we may not be as big as the support in Tennessee, but we're the four quarters against 1,000 pennies. We got you. We're solid. We're strong. We know what we're doing. And we will guide you every step of the way. We guide you, whether you need, and different people who are running within Outrun have had different needs. Some of them sincerely need the hand holding, the extreme detail. Okay, this is step 1, this is step 2, this is step 3. Some of them are gung-ho and say, hey, I already got a plan. I'm just bouncing these ideas off you. Tell me what I need to do and I'll get going. So we have a spectrum of people who want to run, but again, do it scared. For me losing more of my friends was worth having the target on my back. Knowing that I was a kid who was involved in street organizations as a youngster, a kid that was considered like the smart kid in my hood because I could play basketball, but I could also do physics. Knowing that I could be the conduit to be the bridge between my hood and the white folks, like I mentioned previously, the white folks who may not be able to receive and digest the message because of what somebody from my hood looks like, how they talk, or where they come from. So for me, the greatest skill that I have is being able to walk into any room, read the room, and know how I have to code switch. Many of us in the Black and brown community, the code switching is a survival skill. Because for us, at least how my parents said, that we had to speak like the white person, talk like the white person, walk like the white person, act like you know somebody, pretend like you are somebody. And so that code switching for me allowed me, in the times that I've been running in office, be able to have the uncomfortable conversations in a way that is digestible for that audience. And then bring those answers back to my hood and say, hey, homie, this is what we got to do to get these white folks rumbling. So being able to do that is one of the most important things for me that is worth having the target on my back. Because I made a decision a long time ago that I have no problem taking the bullets for as long as that means that my community is going to be progressing. Because if I don't get there, somebody behind me is going to come, and they're going to be prettier, and they're going to be more aggressive, and they're going to smack people in the face.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the person that comes behind me is going to be scarier.
Right. So we're getting towards the end of what I like to have for length on this podcast because people start nodding off.
Yeah, I know for sure.
This has been an intense and great conversation, though. But I always like to end on what haven't we talked about? So here's your time. I'm going to start with you, Paolo, and then we're going to go right to you, Giancarlo. What is something that you want people to know that we haven't talked about, whether it's about your organization, your journey, whatever? Free form. So you're up, Paolo.
Our trainings are free. We bring them anywhere. We are willing to make sure that, and especially shout out to Oneida County, where we've been trying to jump off and get launched. We would really want to be able to target your county legislature. Same thing with Madison County, and we worked a little bit there as well. And we'd love to bring one of these to the Onondaga County community. And I think that this would be really useful for some of the more rural and suburban towns. And then my message to every young person that sees this is, if you ever feel like you're boxed in by your age or your ethnicity or your sexual orientation or whatever, and you're not encouraged, that, that you aren't a part of your community because you aren't from a small town, and even the Democrats might say you're not a part of that community. You are. And here's 2 guys that are willing to support you and got your back. 3 guys, I hope, yeah, and got your back to make sure that we can run and you can win. And there's nothing wrong in being scared. There's nothing wrong in having questions. And we're all human. We all make mistakes. And yeah, I guess I'd like to end with, like, we were talking about Tennessee. I really want to talk about our board member, Afton Ben. She spent 4 days organizing the Tennessee State Capitol with another one of our board members, Chase Alexander. This was 3 months after we helped a couple of county Democratic parties enter their county commissions for the first time since the Civil War in Eastern Tennessee. So I think that there's worth and costs in fighting for our rural communities and doing it in a way that actually depicts them as the way they are, because Giancarlos and Paolos and stuff like that, we exist all over upstate New York. We've been here for generations, and to deny the conversations around diversity is to erase us. And so we're not going to be erased, and we're willing to have these conversations, whether it's in the Democratic Party or other progressive organizations.
Giancarlo, you're up. Whatever we talk about.
To encourage somebody, like I mentioned, just do it scared. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to not know what you're doing. I've been involved almost 8 years. I still don't know what I'm doing. But I know that I have a strong support system that'll help me through it. Find out who your local elected is, and if they're not doing what you want, take them out. There was a famous speech by Malcolm X that says the ballot or the bullet. And I like to switch it up and remix it and say the ballot is the bullet. If these people, these electeds, are not doing what you want, shoot them out by going to vote. There is no electoral college in local elections. It's a popular vote. Every single vote counts. So go out there and vote. Go out there and rock the boat. Be the rebel rouser. Be the ragamuffin to make the noise. Because outside of that, once that takes place, accountability can take place. And that is what the majority of Republicans are afraid of people finding out, being knowledgeable about the issues, and then rocking them to bits. So go out there, do it scared, rock them to bits.
Well, this has been an incredible conversation. Paolo, Giancarlo, thank you for coming on Zoom with Czarny. Check out the show notes. I'm going to put in links on how to get involved with Outrun. And I'm sure this isn't the last we're going to hear from them. I really hope that we'll be able to bring some of these trainings. You look, John Deere is right here in Onondaga County. He's on your board. We got to get this done because John Deere is one of our local success stories. Flipping the town of Manlius, and with him and his wife and the Manlius committee, a blood red town that many people felt that that we couldn't win there. And I got to tell you, there are superstars there. So I hope we'll be able to do this here shortly. Paolo, Giancarlo, thank you very much for coming on with Zoom with Czarny.
Thank you, Dustin. Appreciate it, man. Thank you, sir.
And that was my interview with Pablo Cremedis and Mr. Llaverias, who's the members of the Outrun Coalition. It was a great interview. I'm very happy to have had them on. There's some people that are local that are part of that coalition, and I hope that they'll be getting involved with some races here in Onondaga County and throughout New York all year long. So check them out, go follow them, and help out their cause. This week, I did a Zoom. I did a weekly wonk on the town of Cicero. It's still up on my website on dustinsardy.com. But next weekend, I will be doing a weekly wonk, this time on the town of Clay. And then, of course, next week, I'll be doing a commissioner car on Tuesday. It'll be a little bit on the later side as I'll be traveling back from Albany. I'm doing another informational day in Albany next week. And we'll be talking about maybe talking about a New York State budget, but more than likely, still not quite talking about that yet. But we will be talking about the outcomes of the hearings that we've been having this week and early next week, and any hearings outstanding that will affect the primary and general races to come. So And then of course, I'll still continue on with next week's Zoom and Czarny. I'll be talking to Emily Essie, who is running for county clerk. Another candidate interview as we finish up our Zooms in the month of April. I will not be doing a Czarny seminar in the month of April, as I may be doing a couple of those in the month of May to get ready for the primary, or maybe one in May and one in early parts of June to get ready for the primary. So stay tuned for those. I'll be doing one on the polling place changes, which if you look at our feed in Onondaga from the Onondaga County Board of Elections, and also my feed, we posted some maps about polling place changes, and also early voting and I'm sorry, and early voting, and also the how to vote by absentee this year. Those are the two that I'm hoping to get done, or three I'm hoping to get done before election day, the June primary. So I may be doing one in May and one in June to get all three of those topics done. So we'll see how that goes. All right. Thank you very much for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.